What it do, Dream Team? Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction video. This was 3 weeks ago. The U.S. intercepts Russian and Chinese bomber off Alaskan coast. Like Russian and Chinese, like both at the same time. What's going on? Before we dive into this video, if you happen to enjoy it, please don't forget to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. Also, if you have a video suggestion of your own you'd like me to check out, you can subscribe to Patreon and request it. Description section, there's a link where I take premium as well as free requests. Or you can drop it right here in the comment section. Either way, make a request. However, premium and Patreon requests are prioritized.
And a big thank you to Mark Teichner there with our Fox 5 Atlanta team. Do want to get to some of the other big stories here that we have been covering. It is 8 o'clock on the East Coast and 5 o'clock on the West Coast. Take a look at your screen here. 2 Chinese strategic bombers and 2 Russian long-range bombers were spotted flying together in patrol off the coast of Alaska this week. That prompted a joint U.S. and Canadian command to track and intercept the warplanes. Norad releasing the information and adding the flights were not seen as a threat, but that U.S. and a Canadian fighter jet were sent up in response. This is the first known time that Chinese bombers have flown in the North American U.S. Air Defense ID zone, where aircraft are required to be identified for national security reasons. A lot to this here, so I do want to bring in a real expert to help break it down for all of us.
So it sounds like China out here getting bold. This is the first time they flew in the ID zone. First, I guess Russia was like, hey, China, you want to fly over there? Come with us. Come with me. I'll take you. We'll go in that ID zone. You ain't got nothing to be afraid of. You with us. And China was like, all right, cool. We can hold us. So they flying together, though. I don't like the sound of that.
Let's bring in Mark Chandler, the Director of Government Relations and a Professor of Practice at Coastal Carolina University, also a former Senior Defense Intelligence official. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to be here with us today.
You're welcome, Josh, and good morning.
Good morning. Well, first off, I do want to talk a little bit about the overall picture here. Can you explain what kind of aircraft we're talking about? We know that they are Chinese and Russian aircraft, but what exactly are they?
Well, Josh, these are what we call strategic bombers. The Russians had 2 Tu-95 bombers. Those have been around since the Cold War. Think about the US B-52. That's how old these bombers are, from the 50s and early 60s. The Chinese had 2 H-6 bombers. They're the exact replica and a copy of the Russian Tu-95. So they're familiar in the same type of platform and flying there. Now, one thing I will point out, that the Chinese bombers first had to fly to a Russian air base before they could meet up and then take off together to fly against the Alaskan ADIZ out there. And then they were intercepted. You had a great summary. Intercepted by Norad fighters that included F-16s, Canadian F-18s, and some US F-35s.
The big question that so many people are asking, because they hear that this has happened and they say, why is this so significant? Can you answer that question for me?
Well, I think you touched on it in your opening, and the biggest thing is this is the first time these 2 countries have flown their strategic bombers, which are their nuclear-capable bombers, together on a flight into our ADIZ off Alaska. It's also the first time the Chinese have ever flown that far. So this is a significant reach for both countries individually and collectively, and the Chinese have kind of upped their game at this time. So there's some strategic messaging here to the U.S. You know, the U.S. is seen as the most powerful military. It has a long global reach with our Air Force and our military capabilities. We can't underestimate, say, a Chinese or Russian military capability. They're showing us they can do it. So it's messaging to the U.S., it's messaging to our allies that they can bring the fight, if you will, to our borders. They have the capability to deliver strategic assets there.
That's what it sounded like to me as well, even though I believe earlier in the video they said they're just flying, doing test flights, not trying to cause any issues or not trying to cause any problems or anything. But if it's the first time they're flying together, they're strategic bombers that have nuclear capabilities. It's the first time that China even came in the ID zone. Like it sounded to me like a message is being sent. Like he said, we got the capability of bringing the fight to you. We can get to you, and we flying together. Two other superpowers in the world. We flying together. I don't like that. I don't like that message. America, I don't like that message.
Then they're definitely trying to send that signal.
And we did touch on this a little, but can you explain the area where the aircraft were actually located? I know it's known as the U.S. Air Defense Identification Zone. What is it exactly? Because I guess it's not really U.S. airspace.
Well, no, and I'll touch on this. First off, every country with a coastline has what's called its territorial space. So our territory and any nation with a coastline extends out 12 miles. So you go out 12 miles from your coastline, that water is yours. The airspace above that, all the way to space, is your sovereign territory. These bombers never entered our territorial airspace, but they did get into the ADIZ, as you say. So that's been established probably since the Cold War. And the purpose is to allow nations to identify aircraft with enough early warning to go out there and intercept those aircraft in the ADIZ before they can take any kind of aggressive action against it. So in the old days, aircraft used to have to fly all the way into their target area and drop bombs. The irony about an ADIZ today, because it only goes out a couple hundred miles, is that the Russians and the Chinese both have cruise missile capability that they can launch from beyond the ADIZ. So we're still going to identify the threats, and we're still going to intercept them as they come into that area.
A lot of people know
we need, if they can launch them from before the ADIZ, we need some kind of system that allows us to know hey, we need to be able to identify before the cruise missile can be launched, even though I know humanity and technology is going to continue to progress, and the missiles and all that is going to be able to be launched from further and further and further away. But hey, some need to be figured out.
Norad as the Santa tracker. That's what you see every time December 24th into December 25th. But I know they do a lot more. Can you break down what the overall role of Norad is?
Well, NORAD is a combined command. It was established in the 50s between the U.S. and Canada to counter the Soviet missile and bomber threats. Some of these same bombers that were in Wednesday's incident. So when you look at that, they needed a method to identify and track any kind of missile, incoming missile, intercontinental ballistic missile coming over. The shortest path is across the top, across the North Pole and the Arctic. So you look at that aspect, and we needed that early warning. We needed fighters, so Canada and the U.S. got together. NORAD controls the North American airspace. It is that combined U.S. and Canada command. However, it works in conjunction with the U.S. NORTHCOM, and that's a U.S. only command. It's at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs. Both commands are located there. So that's where the command and control for all defense, air defense of the United States and Canada come from.
Wow.
NORAD saying that these aircraft did not appear to be a threat. We've said that a few times, but if that's the case, why would they send the U.S. and Canadian fighter jets up in response? And what do those jets actually do when they're there?
Yeah, good question.
Well, first and foremost, NORAD released that statement about not being a threat after the intercepts. So what happens when we get an early warning, and we've got early warning capabilities that can detect these long-range strategic bombers well in advance. But we have to send aircraft up, the fighter intercepts, for a visual inspection. So we'll launch the reaction force of fighters up to intercept them, and they have to get close enough to those bombers to make sure they don't have any cruise missiles on the wings or hung anywhere on those aircraft that can launch. Now, what they can't see would be any cruise missiles that are up in the bomb bays inside the aircraft. But we have to get an immediate visual inspection, and that requires flying close to those aircraft. I mean, there have been incidents where 200 feet might be close enough, but the Soviets fly a lot closer. The U.S. has
Oh
gotten closer.
wow.
The Chinese get closer 20 feet. There's been some bumping.
God.
So
Oh
those
my
intercept
God.
aircraft will stay with the threat aircraft in this case and ensure that they don't start to veer toward a threat path toward the United States. If they do, then you're going to see a little bit of nudging, aerial nudging in the air where the fighters try to steer them back away from any kind of threat vector. So the fighters will stay with them. We'd have to guarantee they're not a threat. Those fighters that we send up are armed with live air-to-air missiles in case they do have to engage the bombers.
Dang, I
And
feel like dang, because I didn't know all this. So this is all news to me, and it's all very interesting for me to learn. So no matter what, even though they were seen as a non-threat, but that was only known after they were intercepted, after the U.S. and Canada had sent these bombers and air defense into the air to get a visual inspection. Got to get the visual inspection. Y'all got any missiles hanging off the sides? Y'all got to do? Am I seeing any weapons? And you got to get up close and personal. I can't. Sometimes you can do it from 200, but sometimes you get to the point of bumping. You got to make sure. And so it seems like visual inspections, like he said, I guess I'm only going off what he said, are getting closer and closer. And this is not just a North America, U.S., Canada thing. This is if America goes into one of their airspaces or anything like that, same situation is going to happen. And then it seems like, okay, now the fighters have to stay with the aircraft just to be sure. You got to be sure. Just to be sure they don't go into a path that's dangerous to the U.S. that looks like they could attack. Hey, and if they kind of is on the path, them fighters, hey, bump you, hey, wrong way, bud. Hey, turn. And they nudge you enough, they bump you enough, and you don't turn, you still stay on that dangerous path. It's like, hey, we're gonna have to take you down.
any surprise that NORAD did release this information to the public?
Well, no, I'm not surprised. When I worked in DOD, we would get early warning of this. We would send the fighters up. We'd intercept. We would ensure that there's not a threat to the United States or Canada. And after that time, just as kind of a confidence building measure to show that we can detect this threat early enough, we can defend the continental United States, we're going to release that statement. It's kind of a confidence building to show that we do have the capability and that we're countering the messaging that, in this case, Russia and China are trying to send to the public.
This is a tough question.
Okay, so he said Russia and China trying to send this message. Hey, we can bring it to y'all. We can get to y'all. Then America and Canada are saying, hey, no, you can't. We see you, but we see you before you can do any real damage, and we gonna get up there and we gonna take you down. So, American citizens, feel safe, feel secure. We got y'all.
But what is the current relationship between China and Russia and their relationship overall with the U.S. and Canada?
Yes.
Well, like any good relationship story, it's complicated. First and foremost, China and Russia, and primarily as the Soviet Union, were fighting for supremacy of the communist world. They wanted to be the global communist leader. As a matter of fact, in 1969, they fought a vicious 7-month border war. And so you can see the historic animosity is there between China and Russia. But that old maxim, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, seems to play out what's happening today. Because both focus on the United States as an enemy. So that is bringing them together to operate like this. The concern is that togetherness is growing. It might be passing. It might be a target of opportunity, if you will, but it's growing. Just 2 weeks ago, they conducted a combined live fire exercise, Russia and China, in the South China Sea. And these type of aerial, not engagements, but combined operations, along with naval operations, have been occurring and growing in sophistication over the last 4 years. They had 11 ships off the Alaska coast last year. And so you start to look at this growing threat and togetherness. It's all focused against the United States and our allies, and not just China and Russia. This March, China, Russia, and Iran conducted a combined naval exercise in the Gulf of Oman. So you can see that this the one common denominator is the U.S. and what they can do to destabilize or threaten the U.S. at that time.
Of course, it go back to the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so no matter the beef we got going between us, hey, they are the bigger threat to the both of us. So for now, let's put our beef aside, let's put our problems aside, and let's work together to take care of them. Enemy of my enemy is my friend. That just makes sense. But so he's saying what's kind of scary is that these two countries are getting closer and closer, and building that togetherness and doing these joint operations, whether it be naval operations, whether it be air operations, and then also with Iran doing these operations. And so you see these countries coming together, and it seems like he said is the common denominator is the U.S. Is that all these countries see the U.S. as an enemy, so they're starting to work together. I don't like the sound of it, but I'm not really worried about it. I know the NATO. I guess I should be a little bit worried about it. I don't know what to worry about. I don't know the strength of each military. I know Russia has a very capable military and are a very strong military power. I know that China is a great military power, not as strong as Russia, not as strong as the U.S., but I think they have the most soldiers out of anybody. And then I'm not too sure of Iran. I know the U.S., with the money that we spend on military, we better have the strongest one in the world. But then I know also the U.S.'s allies. There's so many allies around the world that we should be safe.
All right, Mark Chandler, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and break it all down. Anything else you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
Yeah, Josh, I'd just like to put on my strategic intelligence hat just for a moment and kind of give this perspective. In intelligence, our job is not to tell you what you want to hear, but to kind of tell you what you need to hear and focus on kind of the future, kind of the strategic picture. And to be honest with you, the United States right now, based on what's happening domestically and what the Chinese, the Russians, Iran are all doing, we are entering into a period between now, or actually we're in it, between now and January of a very vulnerable strategic national threat, if you will. I'm not saying that these countries are going to get together and come after us, but they are working behind the scenes to help destabilize our domestic issue. But if there's a time when the United States is vulnerable during a leadership transition or we're distracted by other factors, it's right now. And if those countries want to act individually, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea even, then they can do so now and feel that this is their advantage. If they bring together some sort of loose coalition, that's even more dangerous and distracting to the United States. So our leadership needs to pay attention externally as well as internally and prepare us for this vulnerable period for at least the next 7 months, I would say. I'm not trying to sound dramatic, but that's something that we look for in intelligence to try to keep our leadership informed and aware of what we might face.
And that's why I like you, Mark, because you don't sugarcoat it. You tell it like it is. So we appreciate that here. All right. Thank you so much for being here with us today, as always. We appreciate it.
You're welcome, Josh. My pleasure. And I hope you have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.
And you are taking a look right there at just some of that new video that was released showing all of this as it did play out. Chanley Painter with Fox News takes a closer look at the video.
We are at the ready. We will always be at the ready.
We're now gaining new insights into Wednesday's joint Russian and Chinese air patrols that took place in international airspace off the coast of Alaska. The exercise marking the first time the two countries flew alongside each other in Alaska's air defense identification zone.
They didn't enter our airspace.
While officials at the North American Aerospace Defense Command say the flights were not seen as a threat, Biden administration officials say the activity is generating concerns in the midst of escalating international conflicts, especially in Ukraine.
We're concerned about the way that China continues to fuel Russia's war against Ukraine by Chinese companies taking steps to rebuild their defense industrial base.
American and Canadian fighter jets were deployed to track and intercept the crafts, which included 4 bombers. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin believes the drills had been planned for some time.
This is the 8th Joint Air Patrol organized by the two militaries since 2019, aiming at further testing and enhancing the level of cooperation between the two air forces and deepening strategic mutual trust.
The joint military exercise happening in the midst of a U.S. presidential election, with officials on the lookout for ways foreign governments may try to take advantage of the upcoming political transfer of power.
They're always testing us.
Russian and Chinese officials say the drills were not targeting any third party and were in accordance with international law. I'm Stanley Painter, Fox News.
Stanley, thank you so much for that report. And you did see in her story right there some of the sound that came in from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin as he spoke about this and other topics. We're going to head to a quick break here at 8:13 on the East Coast and 5:13 on the West Coast. On the other side, we'll play out some of those comments again from Lloyd Austin. You're watching live now from Fox. We'll be right back.
So yeah, it sounds like right now these countries, I mean, just looking at the facts, these countries first time flying together, I guess, in this airspace. But the Chinese, I don't know whether to call them lieutenant or so. I'll say soldier had said this is actually their 9th joint mission, so it's not their first time flying together, or 9th joint air mission, so it's not their first time flying together, just their first time flying together into where America can ID them. And this is China's first time ever flying to where America can ID them. They didn't fly into territorial space, but this was just their first time, so they're not seen as threats. They're saying that right now the USA is probably at its most vulnerable with the transition of power coming. And then you also kind of have this division in the U.S., which I don't like. But yes, the transfer of power, they're saying U.S. right now is vulnerable, and these countries see that. So if they can come together as a coalition, that'd be much more dangerous than them attacking as one. But then the U.S. is saying, hey, we're ready. We're always ready. They're always testing us. We're prepared. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section about that video. That's all we have. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the next one. See you guys next time.